On.
The court is now back in session. The floor is now given to the defense team. To Evidentiary's defense team to continue. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honors, and good afternoon to everyone in and around the courtroom, and a very good afternoon to you, sir. Professor Chandler, I just have a few topics, very short, and not in any particular order. I'm just going to need to clarify a few matters. So the first one deals with the black book, which you have written about in your text, brother number 1. It's E3/17. That's the document number, and I'm going to be referring in particular to page 71 of your book, brother number 1. This is the 1999 edition, page 71, and it's 00392985. I believe the Khmer is 00821734 to 36, somewhere in that vicinity. I'm going to read a line from it, and then I'm going to ask a couple of questions. You say, first of all, let me before I ask any questions. You're familiar with the black book that I'm referring to, the Livre Noir.
Yes, I am.
Okay. And here on page 71, you say the Livre Noir is a melange of truth, reconstructed history, and wishful thinking. And that's the one sentence that I want to focus on a little bit. And it would seem that this is a conclusion that you've drawn based on your historical analysis of much of what the Khmer Rouge, especially the leadership, has produced. But it's in particular with this black book. When looking at it, you see it as a melange of truth, reconstructed history, and wishful thinking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question there? I was reading the text myself. I missed the question. It's my fault.
Okay. All right. It's your interpretation, at least based on your, as a historian, based on what you know of the events and what you have read in the past. When you read this book, the Black Book, you concluded that it was based partly on truth, partly reconstruction of history, revisionism, as some would call it, and part wishful thinking. That's your interpretation of the text itself, right? Of the contents of it.
Yes, it is. This sentence, of course, is in relation, comes at the part of my discussion of the text that deals with the 66, 67 period, but I do say that is true of the entire book as well.
And would you say that you could say the same thing about many of the other things that were produced by the Khmer Rouge leadership, for instance, such as the revolutionary flag? If one were to look at them, that or other documents, that one finds that there's a melange of truth, reconstructed history, and wishful thinking in many of these documents. Would that be a pattern or something that they engaged in?
Certainly, but I think the difference with the Livre Noir and the Tungbat Diwada revolutionary flags is this is a book of history in quotation marks intended for the outside world, so it's an even stronger example of this than, and looking at that phrase itself, I think everyone in the room can realize that every day we spend of our own lives is a melange of truth, reconstructed history, and wishful thinking. This is how people behave, but this document is not a reliable piece of historical text. I did mean to say that. And it does resemble other communist documents in that sense, but it was aimed at a larger audience, and so it was aimed at giving a history of, again in quotations please, a history of Vietnamese-Khmer relations that I think would definitely fit this sentence that I've written.
Right, and I appreciate that, but also if I could, if we could talk in more general terms, also with respect to documents that were produced for internal consumptions. Has it been your understanding of sifting through primary and secondary sources that they did engage in rewriting history? A good example would be, for instance, as to when the party was founded and some of the events that might have preceded the fall of Phnom Penh in April 75, either glorifying, their actions and their accomplishments, or diminishing the participation of others. And just to give you some examples.
Yes, I agree entirely with that assessment of yours just now.
Okay, thank you. If we could go on to another, something slightly different, another topic. Again, this is from brother number one. We've had some discussions yesterday. We talked about what had been going on with the bombings, and we talked a little bit about your testimony as far as people joining the Khmer Rouge. But here I want to focus you on the introduction to your book. Again, this is E317, and in particular, this one part on page 76, and I'll read the part and then I'll ask you a question. You say, over the next 4 years, Ing Sri and other high-ranking members of the party lived and worked among these people. Over the years, the people of Ratanakiri, Krache, and Montanakiri had grown increasingly hostile to the Phnom Penh government as roads, rubber plantations, settlers, and foresters advanced into their hands. Quote, they hated all the Khmer, quote, a party member later recalled. Now, just that part I want to focus on a little bit. And ask you if you could, first, let me say, would you still, do you still stand by what you wrote here?
Yes, I do.
All right, and from reading this, it would appear that in addition to what might have been happening, with the bombings, and I understand you qualified it that in '73 we really see the sort of indiscriminate bombing in many ways by the U.S., but before that there were some bombing in certain areas. But we see that there are a host of other reasons that you've identified that at least the people in these areas it's all right. It's all right. I'll let you get yourself settled again. It seems I didn't think I could have that effect on you, Professor. But it seems that here you're saying that there's a host of some other reasons as well that at least the people in those areas would feel some animosity towards the Phnom Penh government, as you put it, such as the rubber plantation, the building of roads. In other words, it seems that their way of livelihood or their way of living was being impacted in a negative way, at least the way they saw it. Would that be true?
Absolutely.
And would this be one reason, in addition to maybe other reasons, that perhaps some of these people might have joined the revolution or at least were receptive to what they were hearing from those who were attempting to lead this revolution against the government of Phnom Penh?
President, Mr. Expert, please wait. We hear the objection raised by the prosecution first.
Your Honours, if I was to ask the question in these terms, my learned friend would be on his feet, and he knows full well that this is not a proper question. It requires the professor to opine as to the state of mind of third parties, and it's therefore inadmissible.
If I may, Your Honor, use a technique used by the prosecution. Based on your historical research, are you in a position to give us an opinion whether these reasons that you've identified in your book would be a cause for the people living in those areas to be receptive or to be angry at the Phnom Penh government? And if you're not able to answer the question, by no means speculate.
No, I think it's a good question, and we have quite a bit of evidence that many of these tribal people did join the party at this time, or join the movement, maybe not members of the party.
Thank you. If we could move on to another topic, and this is the topic of biographies. And I know I said I wasn't going to go into going to the transcript, and I don't intend to, but just merely in the event you wish to look at it, so you know what areas I'm referring to. But on 20th July 2012, you were asked a series of questions, or there was an exchange concerning the use of biographies. And we see that on page 15 to 16, and that would be on or about. The timer there is slightly before 09.35.07. And again, there's an exchange on page 118 and 119.
The President. Counsel, could you repeat the last statement, because it was not rendered properly. Please be more precise on the date and time.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are two exchanges on 20th of July. The first one is on page 15 and 16 in the English version, and the timer would be somewhere around 09.35.07, And the second exchange is on page 118 and 119. And the timer there would be 15.0809. I'm not interested in going into necessarily what you said. I just wanted to point that out in the event you were interested. What I do wish to share with you is your answer on 6 August 2009. And if we look at, and we should have a hard copy, or we should have it on the screen, I don't know which one. It's D288/4.59.1. This is the transcript from the Doik trial. And the Khmer version, the Khmer ERN number is 00361492. The English is 00361370, and the French is 00361619. And this is on page 32, and it goes on to page 33. Starting on line 15, you're asked a question, and I believe this was the questioning by Judge Cartwright. Would I be correct in inferring that biographies of ordinary cadres at S-21 became a source of information for the regime to identify its enemies, or was there some less sinister purpose? And your answer at Doik to this question was, no, I don't think there's any sinister purpose in making or requesting members of the staff of S-21 to prepare biographies. This was just something that party people and military people had to do from time to time. I would say this was not the purpose. It was just a practice that was universal. The people didn't mind, or maybe they did, but it was a required activity. And so I think it was just one of the normal features of life at the prison, and probably at other offices throughout the country, except that the difference that these other autobiographical documents have not survived, whereas those connected with S-21 have survived. Have you been able to follow me as I read along?
Yes, I'm just amazed at the technology, frankly. But yes, I have.
I am too. Wasn't like that when I first started. Do you stand by this answer that you gave in Doik? And let me just say, in conjunction to what you told us in this courtroom as well, to the questions posed to you on the 20th.
I hope the statements coincided, because I certainly agree with this statement of 09. If they don't coincide, this statement seems to me an accurate statement.
All right. And so, I know the focus, the thrust of the questioning in Doik was S-21, but it seems, from what you're saying, based on your research, that this was an ongoing practice at other places or other institutions or offices, and nothing sinister in and of itself. The writing of a biography was nothing sinister in and of itself. That's what you seem to be saying. Have I summarized your position fairly and succinctly?
Yes, but certainly. It was a nice summary, but the people outside the party, new people and the 17th people, I think, perhaps the ones that the civil party lawyer was referring to, did feel these questions were intrusive and sinister because they'd never been asked to do them before. They didn't know what use was going to be put to these facts that they were setting down. And I think in some cases, certainly new people, the party was going to use that information to see what they could do. Inside the party, it's just to make you a better party person. That's not the same thing.
Right. All right. Thank you. Now, if I can also, today, I believe you mentioned, I think it was today, the days are sort of merging, but today you indicated that it was your opinion that Son Sen was number 3. And not that I am quarreling with that, but as I recall this morning, you had indicated during the one exchange that we had that he was known, or some reputed him to be number 3. Is that correct? You stand by that?
Yes, the way it's worded, I do, yes.
Thank you. Now, in the Doig trial on 6 August 2009, and this is the Khmer is 00361534, English 00361436, and French 00361689. You indicated on this would be page 98 of the transcript, line 15. I think in the Southwest, Tamak had more autonomy than the leaders of the other zones. He was a very powerful person. Number 3, as you say, in the hierarchy, and was not going to take orders from anyone except Pol Pot. And then you go on. So here, I know it's slightly different than what you're saying here today, but suffice it to say, would you stand by your positions today and on Doig that Tamak and Son Sen are sort of neck to neck, a number 3 or number 3 and number 4, either in that order or the reverse order?
Yes, there's contradictory evidence that would make it sound the way you put it exactly.
Thank you. And then the last question, or the last topic, I should say, because I don't want to. Lawyers do have a habit of saying that's the last question and then asking a bunch of other questions. But the last question, I've come across some of your writing, a particular piece of writing where you seem to indicate, and this is in connection to a question that was raised yesterday by the Nunchea team, where you seem to indicate that at least in the 1980s, I'm not going to refer to a document, I'm just going to give the thrust of what you seem to be saying, and then ask you whether you agree or disagree, that in the 1980s, the PRK helped to channel or to construct a narrative of collective memories that more or less suited their own political, that was politically useful for them, for the present and for the past. And then you seem to be going on to say that sometimes these collective memories become the dominant narrative, in a sense, realities. Now, without asking whether this is what you wrote, if you're in a position today to recall or to tell us whether that is in fact how you view things from a historian's point of view.
Two things. The first answer is yes, I certainly wrote that, and I concur with what I said. I do question, or maybe not, it's not my role as a witness to do this, but I'm wondering if 1979 materials are to be discussed in detail or not. I wrote that, I admit that I wrote that, and it's fine, but I'm not ready to go on and say, oh, that's fine, let's keep talking about 79, 80, whatever. I don't want to do that, but I'm directed to do so.
Based on that, let me ask one or two more questions. What I'm interested is when you say, when you talk about a collective memories that are consistent with the political agenda, the reason I'm asking this is that some may either create documents or assist in witnesses. I'm not saying that that's happening today, but in the past, as a narrative been created whereby perhaps it might affect people's memories to adequately recount the events as they occurred at the time, because the memories have been tainted. And I'm based on this based on what you're saying. If I'm mistaken, if this characterizing it as misunderstanding, please correct me.
Your Honours, we've heard objections to the defence on the basis that the professor is not especially qualified to testify on the impact on events or events might have on populations in terms of psychology. This basis of objection to this question requires the professor to enter into the area as far as my understanding close to 79 psychological states preparing to testify to
Mr. President, while I would generally agree with the gentleman, Professor generally did in fact write that in the same position, really asking for clarification, was unable to answer the question without engaging in speculative aspects of what he wrote. That's fine. He's able to answer the question. I certainly think it's within the trial chamber's interest to hear, because the whole point of the trial is to get a proper, accurate narrative. Professor Chen. objection was sustained, you need not answer the question. Professor Chandler, on behalf of Mr. Sharif, Mr. Engadon, and I would like to thank you for coming here to give your evidence. We wish you the best of luck and safe travels. Thank you very much, and thank you, Your Honor, for the time extended for us to examine Professor Chandler.
Mr. Expert, yes, you may speak.
It's a very brief reply. I'm grateful for that last sentence, and it has indeed been a very interesting experience for me to undergo these very skillfully placed questions, and I wish you the same luck you wished me. Thank you very much.
The floor is now given to the defense team for case law to pose question to the expert, David Chandler. Good afternoon, Your Honors. Good afternoon, everyone in the courtroom. Good afternoon, Professor David Chandler. I have some questions to both of you. If you're unsure of the question or cannot hear them clearly, please say so. Let me ask you, are you listening in Khmer or in English?
I'm listening in English, largely because I don't remember how to operate all these buttons. But I can understand most of the Khmer when I hear it over the top of you. But yes, English is the answer to the question.
Thank you. Due to the use of the interpretation system, there could be some gaps between the Khmer and the English language. It seems there is a delay, and there needs to be a delay between a question and answer session. So please be patient with me. My first question is the following. Based on your research, commencing from the Democratic Cambodia period, did you conduct your research solo or as a group or as a team?
Sometimes I was working with other people, but almost all the time I was working by myself and sometimes with an interpreter, but not as say, a research team from a university or something like that.
Thank you. When did you work by yourself? Did you spend much time by yourself into your research?
I'm not sure I followed the question. I mean, I wrote things up by myself. I'm not sure what the question. I didn't understand it clearly. Could you rephrase it? Maybe. I'm sorry.
I'll rephrase my question. You just stated to the bench that you conducted your research mainly by yourself and sometimes as a group, sometimes with an interpreter. My second and follow-up question is that during the course of your research that you did by yourself, did you spend much time doing research by yourself, or you work most of the time with a group or with an interpreter?
Oh, most of the time by myself. One set of interviews that I used was in Galidang in 1984, and for the first day or so, I used an interpreter. But then I found that my Khmer came back to the extent that all the interpreter would accompany my questions and so on would all be. I didn't use him after that. In French research, I never used an interpreter. At sometimes I have not interviewed people speaking Vietnamese or Thai, so mostly in some Khmer situations I used an interpreter, and some I did not. I guess that's what you'd want to know.
Thank you. When you went to interview Cambodian people without the accompaniment of an interpreter, did you face any challenges during such interviews?
Yeah, certainly. I think actually face-to-face interviews with Khmer, I was usually in the presence of someone who could help me, although I sometimes I would often put the questions in Khmer and get the replies, but there'd be someone nearby who would help me. I was never absolutely alone, or no, I'd say very seldom completely alone with someone whose interviews I later used for my work because of just the kind of problems you can imagine might have arisen.
Thank you. Let me confirm that based on your statement, the language for your communication in your research is rather limited. Is that correct?
Well, certainly my interviews in Cambodia are somewhat limited, yes, but I feel I've got a pretty good comprehension of Khmer and use it with quite a bit of confidence, or did at least in the 80s and 90s when I was doing this research. But certainly the limitations. French isn't my native language either, and I feel there are limitations there, but I don't ever use an interpreter when I interview people in French.
I'd like to put some questions during the use of the interpreter in the conduct of your research. When you were interviewing a person, was the interview conducted in a confidential manner, or there were other people in the surrounding areas during such conduct of the interview?
Well, that entirely depends on the context. Some of the interviews were conducted in private, and others were conducted in rooms where other people were listening. It depended on the nature of material I was looking for, the kind of questions I was asking, which were not really very embarrassing in any cases. Yeah, sometimes there are other people there, and sometimes there weren't.
Did you ever face a situation that suppose you're interviewing a person by the name of A, but then a person by the name of B replies on behalf of A?
I can't specifically remember such a thing. No, it was not the question. I see what you're saying. If we'd ask a question, then someone else in the room would say, "Oh, the real answer is such and such." I don't remember I did team interviews like that. I'm not sure that, but if I did, it might have happened, but I can't remember a specific case. Certainly, I should add, certainly the people I interviewed never came along with spokespeople who were speaking for them and were directing my questions. Were saying, my my friend won't answer that question because it was not a legal situation in that sense. Be someone else in the room would not be a spokesperson guiding the conversation from the point of view of the other person. I was never in that situation.
In relation to the time, can you tell the bench what time you usually conducted your interview? I mean the time of the day, from what time to what time, and during which year mostly that you conducted those interviews? As they were later used as the sources for your books, which are placed in the case file.
Thank you. I would say I began conducting interviews specifically connected with my work in 1985. The interviews in Kaohsiung in 1984 were not connected with work I was doing. It was connected with the UNHCR program I was employed to work with. 85, 86, from 85 to, I guess, 92 or 3, interviews were conducted in Australia, France, United States, Canada, Cambodia, and Thailand. Time of day, of course, varied enormously. I never conducted interviews in Cambodia between 11 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, for example. And I never conducted interviews late at night, that I recall. They were during working hours, always with the consent of the person I was talking to. These interviews, as I said before, were in English, French, or Khmer, depending on the preferred language of the person I was speaking to. So I did interview several Cambodians in France and Canada in French, and some Cambodians in Australia in English. Oh, I should say Australia and the United States in English.
If you can provide the bench with a percentage, did you mostly interview with the honorary people or with mainly the refugees?
I'm sorry, could you reword the first part of your question? Did I only interview with the what people or with refugees? I missed a word there. Did you interview with the or with refugees? You're trying to get a percentage of those. I missed what the first category was.
Thank you. My question is, those people that you interviewed, were they mainly refugees or Cambodian people who were living in Cambodia?
Well, it had to be mainly refugees up to 1990 because that was the first time I came back to Cambodia to do research. In the 1990s, many of my interviews were conducted here, but the overwhelming majority would still be among refugees, I think. If you go from 85 to 95, most of them were with refugees or, the people in Kaohsiung weren't exactly refugees, but people outside of Cambodia certainly.
Thank you. Did you put those people that you interviewed into different categories? For example, those who pro-Democratic Cambodia and those who oppose the Democratic Cambodia regime?
Not before I spoke to them. I could, from the time the interview went on, I could figure out which positions they took. I talked to some, I must admit, few people who were strong supporters of the Khmer Rouge, particularly since I didn't get in here till 1990. But some people had some balanced views. I did not reject that information they gave me. In other words, I was not seeking some sort of prosecuting evidence. I was seeking information as best I could. I listened to everything I could find.
Thank you. What measures did you have in place in order to obtain a neutral information from those people whom you interview in order to avoid any political bias or tendency?
Well, that was a very difficult ask. I don't think you could talk to survivors of the Khmer Rouge regime and get a completely balanced, impartial, and neutral view. They were people who had a neutral view of the of decay. Seemed to me. Well, let me say, I've never found a person who had a neutral view of democratic Kampuchea. I found some who would approved of the regime. I thought their testimony was very interesting. I found others who disapproved. Their testimony was also interesting.
Thank you. I now touch upon another new subject in relation to my client, Mr. Khieu Samphan. Did you know my client, Mr. Khieu Samphan, before?
No, I've never met him or spoken with him. But I should add, I certainly knew him by reputation throughout his career. I followed his career with interest, but personally, I've had no contact with him.
Thank you. When did you start hearing about him or his name or his popularity?
Well, they were synonymous in the period that I was in Cambodia, 1960 to 62, my first time here. He was well known as as a person with extreme and rather bewildering integrity. He was admired by people who admired integrity. He was, I think, again, I'm sorry, one of the I think Sihanouk was a little bit frightened of him because of that very quality. This was a person, his reputation was such that he was not buyable. He couldn't be bought. This was a reputation that was among the crony circle of Sihanouk's era was very rare indeed. So I had heard of him in a positive framework. Of course, I'd have to add I was working for the American Embassy, and we were interested also that he was a person of pronounced left-wing views. That was that was fine also. That was a piece of information. But what was around, what one could pick up about him from Cambodians I spoke to, by and large, good deal of how should we say, admiration. I left in '62, so that's the last time I was in town when he was there.
About the capability and the competence of Khieu Samphan. Can you corroborate further on this point? Why was his presence a concern for Sihanouk? I would appreciate if you can clarify this matter a bit further. Thank you.
Well, he was just, I've tried to say it before. I'm not saying that your following question is very good, but he was just the kind of person that Sihanouk didn't know how to deal with. He had no experience with people that he couldn't dominate, manipulate, influence, purchase, rent, all these kinds of words you might use about his political style with associates. And he's admitted in his own writings that one of the reasons he placed Hun Sen in office in the Department of Commerce was to see if he could join the team, as it were. And Khieu Samphan's performance as a sub-cabinet minister was not marked by the slightest corruption. So this is the kind of thing, I think, what concerned Sihanouk was that this was a person not only that he didn't like, there are many, many people he didn't like, but someone who was able to operate on a different set of moral guidelines from his associates.
Thank you. Through the Khmer channel, I heard the name Hun Sen. Did you use the word Hun Sen in your response to my question then?
Certainly not. I don't know how it got onto the channel. I was speaking entirely of Sihanouk. And of this early period, also the 60s. I'm not mentioning Hun Sen at all. Nor did I mention Hu Nim or Hu Yuan, whose names might sound a little bit like Hun Sen to a translator, but those names had not yet come into discussion either.
Thank you. I am still unclear on this issue, and I believe the bench is not clear as well as to the reason why Sihanouk was so concerned of Mr. Kissimpon. Is it because of his honesty, or of his work qualification or competency? Can you clarify the matter a little bit further, please?
It wasn't because of his competence. Sihanouk recognized that Kissimpon was a very competent and well-trained person with an interest and ability in certainly the economic sphere. What he didn't like was the fact that although Sihanouk's thesis, although Kissimpon dedicated his thesis to Sihanouk, as I think almost all Cambodian PhD students did at that period, that this was a person he couldn't reach to influence and dominate.
Thank you. During the course of your study and research, can you tell the bench a bit clearer at the time that Kissimpon fled into the forest during the announcement of the traitors? Can you collaborate a little bit further regarding the time that Kissimpon fled into the forest?
I should have brought my book with me, but I've gone into quite a bit of detail on this issue in the tragedy of Cambodian history. This is a period when there's a good deal of uneasiness or conflict in Cambodia, as we mentioned before, the Samlot Rebellion, the kind of Maoist orientation of the local Chinese population, for which Hu Nim was being blamed. Kissimpon was there as he was back in the National Assembly. The National Assembly of 66 was the one I think I've mentioned, where none of the candidates had been handpicked by Sihanouk. As a matter of fact, had he had the choice, he probably by then would not have chosen these leftist candidates again, but they ran, and Kissimpon returned with an increased majority, as I recall. Sihanouk was starting to think that his enemies might be different from the sort of standardized American target with which he was familiar, that rather like the CPK, though I'm making no comparisons there, he began to see that enemies inside the country might actually be opposed to him. And in fact, he's correct. I think we know now from Kissimpon's autobiography and so on, these people were opposed to him, and they were working not to overthrow him, certainly not to support his continuing rule over Cambodia. So he was he was getting nervous, and when Sihanouk got nervous, he got aggressive. And I think my impression, I have this confirmed from Khieu Samphan's autobiography, which I have to revisit. I get the feeling that Khieu Samphan felt that this threat might go further than words, that it might take a physical form. And I think he may well have been correct in thinking that, because Sihanouk had already ordered severe punishments on people. So that was the reason he fled. Or left Phnom Penh. I rather not use fled, I just say left Phnom Penh.
Thank you. You stated that Khieu Samphan was fearful and left. What was the sign indicating that he was fearful, that he had to leave? That is, to leave Phnom Penh and to reside in the forest.
The evidence comes to me from his autobiographical writings. I'd have to see those to see if I'm wrong in assuming that that thought didn't come out of his own words when he wrote about why he left Phnom Penh and so on. He didn't say, I left Phnom Penh because I was very happy there and wanted to go live in the country for a while. No, he fled, and I think he admitted, I would have to see the text, but I'm pretty sure he admitted that he was fearful of what might happen to him. And also, although this was not stated in the autobiography, clearly fearful that this whole campaign of Sihanouk's might start reaching out further and further into the leftist opposition and endanger the existence of the CPK, of which Khieu Samphan was a member, secret member.
Thank you. You just said that Khieu Samphan was a secret member of CPK, that is the Communist Party of Cambodia. Is that correct?
Yes.
So much.
I beg your pardon. Could you please respond again so that the interpretation system can pick your response up?
អំបញ្ញមិញហ្នឹងគាត់ឆ្លើយថា
I heard that you replied yes, but it did not go through the interpretation system.
Make it easy for him. The answer is one word, yes. They often not have that luck sometimes in my testimony, I admit.
Question. Did you have any piece of evidence to support your idea that Mr. Khieu Samphan was a member of the CPK?
Not in front of me today, but I could certainly come back to it tomorrow. I know it's in my hotel room, and it is not in the closing order either. So I could come back tomorrow with specific reference. But I think this is a well-known fact. I don't think he's ever publicly denied that he had this membership, but that's speculation. I think this is well-known in all. It's been an accepted fact for a long time. And I'd like to see any evidence that directly contradicts that. But I say, for my source, I have to come back tomorrow.
Question. So you indicated that tomorrow you could explain further based on the document you could read today. Is that what I understood from your statement?
Yes, and I'm only suggesting a member of the party. I know he was not a member of the standing committee apparently until 1971, so I'm not saying that. Member of the party. If I turn out to be misinformed, I'll be able to tell you that tomorrow, but I'm almost certain this was the case.
Council, thank you. Could you also tell us from which period of time when Khieu Samphan, as you indicated, became member of the CPK?
I'll have to do that tomorrow also. I will have to do that tomorrow also. If I don't have the information, I can't give you the date as well.
Council, thank you. I have another special question. Have you ever studied Khieu Samphan biography uniquely, or you only studied the biography as in general as others?
Well, his is a printed autobiography in book form, and I certainly read that book carefully. So I think I can say I have studied him with interest. I have not studied him as a biographical subject as I studied Pol Pot, but I studied his own writings about his life with great interest, and the writings of other people about his life with great interest.
Council, thank you. So you studied the biography with great interest because Khieu Samphan was the leader after 1979 or during the time when he fled or left for the jungle?
No, I studied. I probably didn't make myself clear in the earlier question. I'm sorry. I studied it with great interest because it was a unique document in the sense that it was an autobiography of a high-ranking figure in the DK regime and also in the left opposition to Sihanouk, a character who is probably more well known to many Cambodians than any other person defended at the trial. I read it because it was I read it primarily because it was available, and that's why I read it with interest, with no special interest in any single period, but rather to see how he treated the whole trajectory of his life.
Council, thank you. The reason I asked this question because I have some follow-up questions concerning Mr. Khieu Samphan's membership in the CPK. Could you also tell us when exactly Mr. Khieu Samphan joined the CPK?
You've asked me that before, and I said I cannot do that today. You asked that about 5 minutes ago. If you look at your file, I cannot tell you exactly. I might be able to tell you tomorrow. I've said that already.
Council, thank you. Indeed, the previous question was about his membership, the secret membership. But since you indicated that he was also a secret member, then he could have been also an open member. So the next question that I just put to you was about his membership. Would you also be able to tell me now, or just wait until tomorrow that you can answer to both?
That I can answer at any time. There were no open members of the CPK. All memberships were secret from anybody but the fellow members. If you were a member, you were a secret member. There was no open member. And I will answer the question about his being a member, which is to say a secret member, when and if I get that information from what I've got in my room. I'm sorry, I don't mean to seem in any way uncooperative, but I think that's been made clear through other testimony that this was not a party operating in the open at any time after it never operated in the open until 1977. So, secret member is a member, same thing.
Council. I would like to also ask you a few questions concerning Mr. Kilsampon's roles in the CPK. Do you think you could tell us something about this if questions posed to you?
I hope so. I hope it can help you. Yes, I do.
Council, thank you. Do you know when Mr. Kilsampon were the candidate member of the standing committee, or central committee, rather?
Yes, 1971.
Question: when did he become the full right member?
Wait maybe 30 seconds. This was one thing I was asked before. I looked it up and I found it, and then I was not asked the following day, so let's see what I've put in my notebook. Just a second. My writing is just terrible. No, hold on. Just a second. Okay, it was in. He became a candidate member of the Central Committee in 1971, and the source I used there, that was from the closing order, but it was an apparently open document. The written record of interview with Khieu Samphan document, that's footnote 4435, paragraph 1130 of the closing order. So that was in Khieu Samphan's own words, in other words, when he became a member. He became a full right member in July 1976. That's the same text of Khieu Samphan's.
Council interrupts. Apologies, Dr. Chandler. Could you please speak slower, because the Khmer rendition was not good enough for to listen. The President. Council Kung Samon, Mr. President, we would like Dr. Chandler to repeat his statement, the current statement, the President. Dr. Chandler, indeed, you should repeat your last response, because it was made rather fast that it was not properly rendered.
I think I may have been overexcited by actually being able to cite a fully footnoted source, which I haven't been able to do in the previous testimony. I was asked to look this up, and I did. He became a candidate member of the Central Committee in 1971, and the information I got from from footnote 4435 of the closing order, which refers, coming from paragraph 1130 of the closing order, referred to a statement, a written statement by Q Sampan interview with the trial. I don't know what the trial. It's a trial document, and so it's his own words. So too, the date of his becoming a full rights member in 1976. The same text drawing there on footnote 4639. So these are his own statements. I mean, I think we can go ahead this way, but it seems not entirely fruitful. But I'm not in a position to say that.
The President. Thank you, Counsel, and thank you, Dr. Chandler. Since it is now appropriate time for adjournment, the Chamber will adjourn until 3 o'clock. Court officer is now instructed to assist Dr. Chandler during the adjournment.